My name is Diana Ryers, and I connect humanity through the art of storytelling. From the beginning of time, people have been sharing their stories within their tribes, around campfires, within their families. I remember as a young child, that was one of the things I used to love, was when all of my aunties and uncles and relatives would get together and they would start sharing stories. And I was so intrigued by that. I was intrigued by who they were and what they were sharing, what they had done in their past. I had a lifelong dream of being a writer and creating a book. That also came from when I was a young girl. I wrote poetry and I loved the magic of words. Before I moved to the island to retire, I realized just how many stories I had been told throughout my career as an authenticity coach. 13 years of stories. Their stories needed to be shared. It was really important to share stories that would resonate with other people and inspire them to perhaps move towards a more authentic way of being. When I got to the island, I started to contact these people and I asked them if they wanted to share their stories. Most of them did. They had no problem sharing their stories.
And I never knew that I could write my own story.
I used every single day for 2 years just trying to die.
I've lost 171 pounds at the last count.
It was my dad. I was sexually abused by my father.
We had progressed to heroin, so I mixed them two up, one for him, which was about a third of what I usually did, and one for me. Looked over at him and realized he wasn't sleeping. He was dead.
I found the 10 authors that I wanted to work with, and they began to write their stories. My role within this process is to support them with the editing of the stories, to ensure that we are offering the world stories that are written the daring to share way. I'm talking about ensuring that they are told in a way that is respectful to everybody involved. Sometimes that's a difficult task when they're going through this process of writing their story. Things are triggered and emotions sort of bubble up. Anger, frustration, all kinds of feelings come up, and so sometimes they want to share that in their stories. And it's okay to share that because of course those are real feelings, but we need to do it in a way that is still honoring where people are within their own personal evolution.
I just remember being a little girl that was just followed by light. Everywhere I went, I felt that light and I felt that connection in my life. And then it went away when I was about 8 years old.
And for a long time I hid it. I was so filled with shame and embarrassment. I made excuses constantly for his behavior, sadly to other people, but even more sadly to myself and to my kids.
He would lift me up by my throat with his hands into the air, and he would smash my head into the walls and in the kitchen cupboard, and he would be yelling at me, and there'd be like the spit flying out of his mouth, and it'd be landing on my face, and his breath would be horrible.
So I think I fell into his clutches very quickly after being adopted. He was also a Grand Master Freemason, and out of the town lodge ran a porn ring, which a bunch of us kids were regularly used for films and different things. And so we were lots of torture, lots of mind control programming.
The second book, the special edition book, when I worked with these women in recovery, and I realized that those women in recovery were managing a lot of shame and blame, and their recovery was really more about getting over trauma than addiction. And once I realized that, it was very clear to me that they're no different than I am, because we all have some form of trauma within us.
I was so caught up in my trauma It was what defined me, not my addiction, not my alcoholism. It was actually trauma.
I've actually learned too that connection is the opposite of addiction, yeah, which is isolating and everything.
Two guys locked me up in a garage, and I was raped and beaten for 2 days.
Guilt, shame, anger, sadness, and the repeat went on in my life.
I always had this very powerless feeling inside, and I just succumbed to it. Like, writing my story, it's helped me just embrace that little girl who didn't feel lovable.
From there, everything spiraled into the events. We decided that we were going to hold Daring to Share storytelling events at different venues on the island. We would take the authors, we would take the members from the community, anyone who wanted to share their story from there to here. And we would do it in a venue like a restaurant. We would support people to be very vulnerable. We would provide them with that really trusted environment where they knew that they could be safe sharing their story. And with every event that we had, people came and that we filled the room and people loved it.
I found it to be fairly life-changing. Like, there are things that I wouldn't have had the courage to face in myself without having their stories to kind of guide me.
I think we can all find a connection within the stories that these people share with us. It all tugs somewhere within ourselves.
These, I feel, are the stories that normally we don't share, and normally the things that we don't want people to see. So I feel like those are the things that sometimes connect us the most when we're not putting on those masks that we put out into the world these days. And I think it really helps people that are going through things to know they're not alone.
This is what we used to do when we were hunters and gatherers, is we'd gather around a campfire, and this is how we would share wisdom and experience. And, you know, we've lost that in modern times. We've lost that human connection of looking someone in the eye and sharing their journey and sharing their pain and sharing their joys. You know, we're all about sound bites and Instagram posts and how many likes we get. And this is an actual way to genuinely connect with your fellow human being.
This is the important work, to continue to bring together people in communities and really connect with our humanness, with our rawness, and some of the beautiful stories inside of us.
The only intention of the stories being written in the books, as well as those shared in person at the events, were that they would inspire others.
I am a lover of life. I'm an overcomer of obstacles, and I am meant to shine. I did not always realize that. Quite the opposite, really, which is what I'm here to share with you today.
I felt so good, like I had never loved myself before, because my thoughts and feelings about myself were really wrapped up in a lot of fear and shame and guilt, which is kind of the unholy trifecta of religious fundamentalism.
Your life is still going to be your life, and it's on like a book on a shelf. And you can take it down and open it up and share it with others to give them some hope.
Healing takes time, respite, repose, learning to forgive ourselves, discovering our truth. As we dive into our loneliness, feeling this pain, the stinging of our ancestors, we've everything to gain from letting go. Bursting through the darkest skies, becoming you. Living from the inside out, pushing past this fear, experience unworthiness. Please remember, dear, on letting go. You're bursting through the darkest skies, becoming you. This weight's not yours to carry, no, it's time to be set free. I promise there's a purpose and that you are meant to be. Letting go, you're bursting through the darkest skies, becoming you.
The reader or the people in the audience want to hear, how did you do that? So many of us are stuck in that sort of inauthentic way of being, and we want to move forward. We're all human beings. We all want to feel connected to ourselves and to other people, but we're just not really sure or clear about how we want to do that. So my job as the publisher and editor and the support person for the writers is to help them to discover how they're going to articulate and communicate how they did that, because we know that that's the inspiration part, and that's what we want to communicate.
And I go down this path for my whole teenage life and into my early 20s, until I arrive at this point where I'm now involved in crime, I'm having trouble with drugs and alcohol, I'm close to going to jail, I'm not going to graduate from high school, and something happens inside of me. This moment of clarity, this moment where I realize, holy shit, I'm like turning into these men who abused me. These men, I was turning into my stepdad, Frank. And I knew with certainty that I couldn't repeat those cycles of abuse and addictions.
And they booked me into solitary confinement, AKA the hole. And in that cell was where my life changed, where my life transformed.
It's like as doors keep opening for me, I keep walking through them. And sometimes it's terrifying. Sometimes it's like I'm being requested to play in a larger field, the biggest field that I've ever played in, and sometimes I just want to kind of run back over to the fence and stay by the fence because I'm used to the rules and I'm used to feeling protection there, but I'm walking out into the world. It's me on my own 2 feet, and I can do it, and I am doing it.
What I realized through my healing process was I was just going from adrenaline rush to adrenaline rush, rather than sit and feel and experience that loss, that pain, that grief, that sorrow on all those levels. Everything that happened was my own doing. I put myself in situations that weren't in line with my integrity. I acted against my integrity because, hey, it seemed like a good idea at the time. But when I sat down in my quiet moments and really examined myself, I had no one to blame but myself.
I had another choice to make that day, and my choice was, do I go back to living in fear, or do I continue on my journey to freedom? And I chose the latter. I had been beaten down for so many years, I didn't feel worthy anymore. But once I understood how worthy I am, nobody can touch my power anymore.
So I realized that all along, by simply trusting my intuition, I learned all the life lessons that I needed to really serve what I believe is my purpose today.
Through daring to share, we have made a difference. We've supported people to share their story and to have a voice and to feel like they're loved and they belong.
Writing this story was my chance to give my little girl a voice.
It's just about being here and really listening and accepting, creating awareness and kindness for other people, and realizing that we're not alone. And that really has given me the courage to share my story.
I'm sharing my story because I don't want to be afraid.
I can look in the mirror now and really love myself. I used to look in the mirror and I hated what I saw. And that makes me feel really sad when I think back. And I don't want anyone to have that kind of a, feeling of worthlessness or hate, because none of us was born, deserving of anything like that. So everyone goes through trauma. Nothing is deserved.
The only thing that was missing was me to love myself. It's beautiful to be alive today.
With the 3 books out, we're now focusing mostly on the movement, the human advocacy part, the social activism, and really promoting and inspiring inclusivity of all human beings. At the beginning of this whole process of starting the Daring to Share book with Volume 1, we said that we were connecting humanity through the art of storytelling. And it's all about connecting humanity, and humanity is everybody.
We live in a time when there's never been more discussions around vulnerability and authenticity and bearing our souls, because somehow it heals something deep inside of us. And what we're learning is, just by listening to and witnessing these stories, it heals something in all of us.
So what Daring to Share is doing now, in line with the movement, we are inspiring others to create Daring to Share storytelling events in other cities, and we want to support people to do that, using our branding, using the influence that we have now, because people know Daring to Share. So we have credibility. We've got 3 books out there. We've been supporting people to share their stories. We're continuing to do that. We're not stopping anytime soon.
One of the things that I've learned in recovery is that I'm actually have an allergy to alcohol and drugs, because when I use them, I break out in handcuffs.
Right from the get-go, I'm going to let you know this is really quite difficult. And I'm an emotional person. And I am also going through perimenopause right now, so it is not helping at all. It's not helping. I'm probably going to have to whip this off very soon.
For some of you today, after listening to these stories, you may be inspired. Some of you may have realized that now is the time to share your own story.